Dr. John Demartini, I am so grateful and privileged to you for making time available to have this conversation with me today. We know you as a human behavior specialist and polymath, and for the last 10 years you have been one of the giants on whose shoulders I've been standing to learn more about human behavior. And as a behavioral strategist for high net worth families, I am having this conversation with you today to talk about the proverb from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, or from rags to riches to rags, and also the challenges that wealth can bring in wealthy families. So I really wish for this conversation with you to inspire families and to help families to really tap into the wisdom to transform the proverb. But first of all, I just want to make sure that everybody who's listening understands what the proverb is meaning, that the first generation has the big void and is driven to create wealth, put their energy, their focus, their time, their inspiration on growing wealth for the family, often create a family business. The second generation takes over the wealth, they inherit the wealth, doesn't really know anything about the wealth creation process, just maintain the wealth, and by the third generation it's all spent because the third generation is used to an affluent lifestyle but not used to being productive to have an affluent lifestyle.
Definitely. I've worked with clients and some families that have had that challenge. In multi-generational wealth, this is very repeated. You see this over and over again. And it's a challenge because, as you said, there was a void that drove the person to dedicate themselves to build wealth. And then they have a desire, because they had poverty and challenge, they have a desire to give the best to their family. And sometimes they confuse giving them everything with helping them. And they actually can enable them and disable them and make them dependent instead of productive and inspired. And then what happens is that it just goes on, and then the next cycle, it starts over on the next cycle, where the people are enabled and they don't have a desire, and down goes the wealth. And it's not uncommon. And there's a very important thing, because nature has a way of creating that if a person doesn't understand the principles of wealth building and sustain the meaning behind wealth building and the purpose of it. It's important to do it.
So John, I have spoken to many families all over the world, and it's true in the Western cultures and in the Eastern cultures that this proverb has been repeated for multiple generations. Why do you think it keeps on being in the same form? Why is this energy not being transformed? Some families so far have been very successful in transforming it. I think, for instance, about the Rockefeller family. But it's still energy that keeps on repeating itself. Why do you think that?
Well, I think you said it in the beginning that there are some individuals that have a challenging beginning, and they may have come from poverty in some cases. And they swear they don't want to stay there. So they want to work very hard to do something that makes a difference. And they want to earn as much as they can. And they don't want to ever be in that impoverished position, so they save. And they have a very strong work and savings ethic. And then they learn gradually to how to invest it and start having it work for them. And as they do, they're inspired by the idea of building wealth. And it's meaningful to them. And but there's that void that they had with the poverty, their children don't have, unless they are trained. Many years ago, I had the opportunity to watch a Forbes TV special. And there was a very wealthy billionaire from England that was being interviewed. And he understood this principle and saw that he didn't want to repeat that history of that. So he made his children, he had a few children, he made all of them work and start at minimum wage in his own company. And they were never allowed to go to another level in the company unless they had earned it and shown respect by all the other employees. There was no upgrading. And so they had to work their way up and only earn exactly what everybody else earned and had to do every job, and they had to know the entire company or they would never allow he would never allow them to take over the company. So they had to know every single job and learn every single job. And he was saying that he believed that a billionaire was not a billionaire unless they were able to sustain it at least 3 generations. At least 3. He said, because otherwise it's just, rags to riches,
Yes.
to rags again. So he understood the principles and was making sure that his generation had a work ethic and had a void and had to pay their own bills and pay their own responsibilities and had need for wealth. So that's really caring for the next generation instead of supposedly caring for the next generation by taking away all challenge. And now there's another individual that's a wealthy individual that owned a hamburger company in America, a very famous one. And he made a statement when they interviewed him on that same show many years ago that he wanted to make sure that his kids never, ever suffered a loss or lack again. His children did not have the same outcome as the other one. His children ended up going into philanthropy because they had so much money, but they didn't go into working. So they end up spending their money getting a joy out of giving it all away, which is not a bad thing or necessarily, but as long as they're not giving it all away and starting all over, they're distributing it, making a contribution to the world. But again, they were giving it away and robbing somebody else of any accountability to learn from trial and error and to do it. So what happens is they were basically had so much they didn't need it, and so they thought about philanthropy, and then they were robbing dignity, accountability, responsibility, and productivity from the people they were just giving money to. So even if it wasn't them just squandering money themselves, they were going into charity and then robbing other people of that. So it was kind of rags to riches to rags in another way. And so it's so important to be able to have an education around that because otherwise you automatically, as you say, dissipate it. Now, there's also a concern that society has that is the downside of multi-generational wealth. And this is something that has been discussed also. Because if all of a sudden somebody grows wealth and the next generation grows wealth and the next generation grows wealth, you get monopolies in families. And so you can get vast fortunes and monopolies, and then what happens is the money's not distributed in society. And then there's a force back to in philanthropy to get back into the society. So somewhere between those two, the mastery of making sure that there's an accountability to grow wealth and a wise management for the sake of society, there's got to be a balance between that narcissistic growth of wealth and an altruistic service with accountability back to the people. Finding that balance is what I think many of the wealthy people are having to face today. I know Bill Gates is facing that, and Warren Buffett and them are facing that. They're learning how to find that balance and strike that balance, because if not, it just recycles itself.
I have the privilege to have listened to Susie Buffett, Warren's daughter, and when we go to the Omaha week and the shareholders meeting, and she has impressed me as really a responsible in her philanthropy. But I was wondering if, well, she's the second generation, if he has spent time on educating his 3 children on how to really create and maintain wealth. Because what I find is the biggest challenge is with the second generation. They grow up with the perception of wealth. They also know that they're going to inherit the wealth. Oh, what I've also found, but was a big surprise to me, the wealth creator dies, and there is the meeting where the will is being read, and they, for the first time, find out that they are the beneficiaries of a big family trust. And they never knew that they're going to inherit this kind of money. So what my question is, what is it in the first generation? Because both you and myself, I consider us as first generation wealth builders. And we have children who are in their young adult years now, and there's a big responsibility towards them to also educate them. Why? My first question is, why do you think the first generation is often hesitant to even disclose to the children how much money there is, and secondly, to empower them and educate them?
Well, I know, I'll just speak for myself. I remember I was doing my estate planning a few years back, and my kids happened to be in the office. And so I yelled out loud enough where everybody in the office could hear it. I just want to make sure that my kids know that they get nothing. And that it all goes to the Demartini Prize and the Institute. And of course then, I just want to make sure that they knew that, because if they think that they're just going to inherit it, they don't have a drive. They can rob them of a drive. So I made sure that they knew that. And I've made sure I've reinforced that. They're going to have to figure it out themselves. I'll help them, and I'll help them, but they got to stand on their own 2 feet. And the next day my daughter came in and she says, you know, Dad, I've been thinking about it. I'd like to work in the foundation. She came in the next day and made it really clear that she wants to be part of it. But she wants to work for it, and she is working for it. There's hesitancy, I think, because I think some wealthy individuals sense and are concerned that if they just, their kids know that there's unlimited wealth, that they could rob them of that. And so there's a concern about it. But if they really educate them on how important it is to have meaning in life and to be productive in life, and how that's an essential component of fulfillment in life. And money is, without meaning, is not the same as money worked for and having meaning. And because the money that's from an investment doesn't have the same experience as money that's just earned. There's a difference in energy. And educating them on that, I think, is the key. But if you're not educating them on that, you may be hesitant about letting them know you have a lot of wealth, because it may rob them of any drive, and there may be quarrels about it, and it may be that they want them dead, hurry up and die. I've seen that happen. So I think that's one of the reasons they hesitate, because they're not sure how to exactly educate that. If they had multi-generational wealth building training, it could be of great service to them, because they may not know what are the ins and outs and what to do and how to structure that and plan that, to make sure that there's accountability and that they're likely to manage it wisely. Because I have to share a story. I worked with a lady that her father built quite a bit of fortune. And I'm guessing it's not into the billions, but it's into the hundreds of millions. And he was an atheist. And the irony of the whole thing is that she ended up inheriting the money, giving it to religious organizations. If he would have known that, he probably turned over in his grave. But she was giving it to, I'm going to say, religious organizations that were not really using it as they were intending. And she was vulnerable to that, and finally woke up and realized that she was giving money to something that wasn't going to where she thought. And then she felt guilty that she had squandered the money and was vulnerable because she didn't know enough about wealth building. She didn't know how to make it herself. She never worked in her life, and she was just giving it away thinking that was good, because people that do not feel fulfilled and even have shame and guilt over not producing compared to other people very commonly go into an altruistic contribution in form of charity to feel better about themselves. And that, yes, there's a good feeling to help people, but sometimes you rob other people of accountability. In this case, she was actually robbing a lot of people of accountability in that spiritual pursuit. And it was quite interesting. And she finally woke up, and then she started managing her money. And I actually made her list, what did she do to earn all those millions? And when she actually looked at what she did to earn it, her decision on what she did with it changed. And then when I asked her what are the downsides of just rescuing religious groups, she started to see that they were basically robbing other people of accountability and forcing them to face a fantasy about how their life was. And it was a wake up, and she started managing her money wisely, started to appreciate what that dollar was and what it was about and what she could do with it, and prioritize what she was going to do with her money from there on out. How to invest it to where it would continue to grow, and how to use it where it would continue to serve her.
That's great, a great example. So I would like for us to talk about our children. You have Elena, Brisha, and Daniel. They are all in their 20s. Yes. I have my children, Shanae and Jacques, in their 20s. How do you educate your second generation?
Well, I have the oldest daughter. She's now 30. She's going on 31. And she is working in the company. And I think she's done just about every role. So that's I think, to everybody's advantage. She really wants to take over. She wants to do some of the things that I'm doing, teaching and coaching and counseling and things. And she's getting quite great at it. So I have a feeling that she's going to learn and master this pretty well. She's still got a long way to go. She's learning it, but she's definitely on her way to saving her money. She's got an increase. She's got savings. She's learning how to invest. She has a drive for it. She's not trying to get something for nothing anymore. She tried that when she was a teen, but now she's realizing, there's work involved. She understands what it takes to run a business and the challenges that it takes, and sometimes up and down of economics and things. So she's, I think, grounded now. It took her until really mid to late 20s before she started to grasp really what it was about. So I've done education as I'm on the road with her and traveling with her, and sometimes sitting down and having lunch with her. I'll have it a lot more because I have intention to hand over some things to her. So I'm going to be doing more and more education as it goes. But she's gradually doing it. But if you give an education to them before they even have a need or a reason for it, they don't remember it. So now that she's gradually taking on accountabilities, paying it, she's got a new apartment she's paying, she's got more and more responsibilities. She's understanding more and more about it, and she's receptive to hearing it. So you have to introduce accountabilities and responsibilities and productivities for them to feel the pressure of knowing what it's like how to wisely manage money. Now, Brescia is my middle one, and she has her own company. She's got a fashion company. And she's really I'm really inspired by what she's doing. She's very talented. She's driven. She's starting to sell a lot of clothes. She's making some money. She's not learned everything about all the bills, really, that it's responsibility, the taxes. There's a lot of complexity she hasn't gotten to. But you can see that every week, almost every month, you can see a vast difference in what she's doing. So she's mastering it. And it used to be that I was part of the funder of the organization. But now she's self-sufficient. She's actually starting to make money, and I don't hear from her that often. And so I'm seeing that she's now taken on more, and I'm giving her more things. Okay, well, now we have to save a portion of it. We have to do it here. How do we do it? I'm giving her feedback every time I see her. And so I think she's a year away from being a totally self-sufficient entrepreneur. And that's inspiring to me because that's what your dream is, I think, as a parent. You want that. You want to see them stand on their own 2 feet and fly. And I believe that she's going to probably excel and make a lot of money. I think she's going to be very wealthy. She wants to take over Coco Chanel's position. And I really believe that she's got the power to do that. So she's going to do well. Elena, I think, is going to do fine. Now, Daniel is younger. He's 24. And he's about 25, and he's just got clear about what he wants to do. He's been kind of beating around the bush, and I've always given the door open in case he wants to be involved in this, what I'm doing. But I didn't want to force it on him, but I just wanted to make sure that if I was there, I wanted to know that the time is ticking. You need to make a decision. So I told him, if you don't decide for yourself, you're going to get people pressuring you, pushing you. And because if you don't, there's a basic law of Parkinson's, if you don't fill your day with things that inspire you, it fills up with things that don't. And if you don't learn to manage money wisely, you don't get the money to manage. So he's now onto his mission. I've never seen him so inspired. I mean, the last few weeks has just been, I don't even recognize it, because he was quiet and kind of introverted. Now he's like really animated. He's talkative constantly. And he's really focused on his thing. And he wants to involve in gamification. He wants to contribute to the field of IT and technology with games. And he's on a roll. So I have a feeling that he's driven to make money. I told him last year, I said, I just want to let you know that my job is to get you completely independent. And by 25, my expectation is you start taking command. Because it used to be at 18 you did that. Now it's about 20, 25. But I said that, my job is not to take care of you. You have to take care of yourself. And I've made it clear to him, all of them are having clarity now, that they have to be self-sufficient individuals. It's not my responsibility to take care of them, or they can't rely on my money. I can't guarantee them that I'm going to give them a penny. They have to earn it. If I saw that they didn't know how to manage money, I would leave them nothing, because I want them to grow up.
Of course, and it must be really rewarding for you to see that they are starting to take accountability.
It's more than rewarding.
Yeah.
It's relieving.
It's relieving, I agree.
It's both. Yeah. It's both. It's rewarding, and it's brought tears. When I heard my son the other day focusing on his mission, I just got tears in the eyes of gratitude. Because I think a parent, at least for me, I think a parent has fulfillment watching their child find their inspiration, finding what they want to dedicate their life to. So that was a very inspiring moment.
I had the same with my daughter, that's 28, who bought 50% shares in a business, and she came to us as the parents and asked if we can loan her money, and we have a physical contract, and she has to pay back with interest into the family bank. And it's very inspiring to see how she's taking the very focused step to be an entrepreneur. But also the trend seems to be that your older children can often be the ones who, and Susie Buffett also said that to us, we didn't grow up with a billionaire father. He was just still Warren Buffett. And we didn't know that there was money. We lived in the same house, and we went to the same school, and we drove the same car, and we didn't have an awareness of wealth. That children, the younger children, often grow up in that more affluent lifestyle. I'm talking about the second generation.
Yeah.
And they seem to be the ones who often fall a little bit behind or take a bit longer. I'm thinking of a family that I'm working with, and he's not 25 years old, and what we call him, a young man, said to me that, I know that my father is looking after me. I don't have to work. And I know that when he dies, I'm going to take over the money, and I don't have a purpose. So his biggest struggle is, how does he find a purpose in life? How does he find meaning in life? I also think of how my cousins came to me. I have 7 cousins. I'm the oldest of 4 children. And they came to me and said, please teach us, because they hear me speak about this all the time in our family gatherings and family dinners, how important it is for the second generation to be empowered. And they came to me and said, please teach us. So I've arranged with them now that I will run a retreat with them twice a year. So the oldest one is 18 and the oldest one is 28 and the youngest one is 13. But it was their group decision that they came and asked me to do it. So that was really inspiring for me.
I think that's essential. I actually have planned when I get back to Houston here in a week or so, a powwow, family powwow.
Yes.
And because I have a situation where my first wife was not empowered financially, and we divorced many years ago, 20-something years ago, and she grew up in a family that was more socialistic, and where the government should take care of you, and that you should have people take care of you, and that was the difference that I had. Very commonly when you marry, you play a pair of opposites. I was more the capitalistic, you work for your money and you earn it and you save it and things like that. Hers was more you spend it and people take care of you. And so the family, the children, are now having to face the idea that her mother expects them to take care of her. And she's perfectly capable of working, but she doesn't want to work because she just assumes that the kids should take care of you. And this now puts another challenge on the kids because what do? If they take care of their mother, I've talked to the kids, and there's a part of them that goes, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to do that.
But there's a guilt towards it.
There's a guilt if you don't, and there's frustration if you do, and there's a resentment there.
Yes.
And so that's one of the reasons we're having a meeting. And I'm going to have to step in and say, because I'm not married to her anymore, it's not my real responsibility, but it's still part of the family.
But it's still they are possibly still perceiving it's their responsibility. So what do you wish to say to them?
Well, Elena has been taking on the majority of the crunch. She's been helping her mom. But what's happening is she's now realizing if she enables her mom's not going to drive. And her mom took care of her parents, but her parents had some wealth. So taking care of your parents and living off the wealth of the parents is different than having nothing and then having your kids take care of you. It's a different thinking. So there's going to have to be a reality check to all the children are going to have to take a part of that based on their own levels of income potentially. And gradually maybe that has to be remodeled according to their income levels. They're going to have to be able to say that if your mom is not able to work or choosing not to work, you're, because I believe she is capable of work, then how do you feel about that? And share that with your mom, and don't hold back what you're actually experiencing, and let her know what it is. And then if that is the case and she's refusing to do it and she gives her reasons for it and you're okay with that, then there's going to be accountabilities and responsibilities on paying for that, and those bills could go up at a time. As your income goes up, it will go up, because as you mature, you may have more bills. So, because I know the oldest daughter, Elena, is challenged by having to take on most of that now, because she's making most of the income. And she's resenting it, and she wants the other two to participate. At the same time, the other two are hesitating on making some of that money because they know they're going to have those responsibilities. So it's an interesting dynamic. So I want to have a powwow and say that these are the responsibilities, so you either have to speak up or negotiate. So you have to negotiate where everybody decides this is what we're going to do, and it may have to be renegotiated periodically, or you have to speak up and let them know what's going on, because if you don't want to take care of them, then you may have to speak up, and you have to have the consequences of the mom may not have an income. She has to either go to work or go to the streets or something. And so it's a challenging dynamic, but it has to be educated, and it has to be rational, or otherwise it's just repressed.
So John, they are 3 young adults, and it is wise that they make a team decision about it. Are you planning to sit with them and almost mediate a meeting?
Yeah, I see myself as directing the meeting so it gets done.
Yes.
Because if I step in and rescue, it's not helping anybody.
Yes.
And I'm just going to be put into a situation that's not even my responsibility, ultimately. So I think the mother needs to hear what the children really feel. I think the children need to know what the mother's reasons for it are, and so it's all on the table. And so there's wiser decisions instead of assumptions. And I think that there has to be patience on some respects, because they're not earning as much income yet, and there's not much they can contribute yet, some of them, and or 2 of them. And the other one is overdoing it. So I think that they need to know the reality that if their mom's making that decision, that they're going to have to play some of that role. And I think that's it'll be a great education for the kids,
Yes.
and it'll make them stand up and have accountability, which is great. Or it'll make the mother have accountability, or a combination. I'm hoping for a combination.
Yes.
Where the mother works some, maybe she can't sustain all of her income, but the kids take on some, and so there's a nice blend in a family unit that way. I think that's the part. And I don't mind participating in some respects to assist them in that transition, but I don't want to be the rescuer any more than any of my kids do. I know that the middle one, Brescia, has had a few spats with the mother about it, but she's working for the middle daughter at times. So as long as she's working, the payment for that is a fair exchange. But if she's not working, then there's not a fair exchange, and she doesn't want to pay her if she's not doing something. So these are all things. This is another factor that people have to understand, that true value comes from truly serving a need. So many times in families, particularly family businesses, members of the family assume that I'm in the business, I do whatever's needed, but they have to really produce, because they get something for nothing. It's setting a stage across the entire company, for instance. If they're not really earning, but they're getting a better income than they really earn, then it creates problems for the whole company. They have to get paid a fair exchange. And this is where the education comes in, having real equity and fair exchange in transactions when it comes to economic. I think that's one of the biggest things that I try to educate people is maintaining equity and fair exchange. If there's no fair exchange, eventually it creates change until you get fair exchange.
John, one of my clients said the following to me, and I want to actually read to you word by word. She said, the biggest curse of intergenerational wealth for me and many other people is the illusion that you don't have to do much with your life. You might want to, and you might make the effort, but you don't have the same pressure to earn enough to live on. And that takes away a lot of the incentive to find meaningful work. Now, you and I are both part of the baby bloomers. And did you hear that they say that the baby bloomers are the only generation that often have to take care of 3 generations: their parents, themselves, and their children. The person that I was speaking to here and who's given me this feedback was a 2nd generation. And as I was listening to her, what came through my mind is she doesn't understand the key elements that give meaning to life. Let's talk about what gives meaning to life.
Well, in my idea of it anyway, I believe that everybody has a set of priorities, a set of values in life. those values are birthed or born out of the voids that they perceive. So if a person perceives that they don't have a relationship, they look for a parent or a family member or a partner. If they feel that they don't have a service for the world, then they look for, how do I give a service? If they feel they don't have money, they search for money. If they feel they don't have health, they search for health. If somebody provides everything, and it's all taken care of, and you have no needs, and you have no void that you're aware of, you sometimes lose drive. You don't have the drive to go and fulfill anything because it's all taken care of. You're enabled. And this is what, that void that's missing then has no value. The highest value, the ancient Greeks called the telos. And the telos, that highest value for an individual, was the one that had the most meaning and purposefulness, the one that had the most fulfillment. So everybody has a set of values, but if there's no big voids in their life, there's probably no big values in their life. If everything's being taken care of, they don't know what to do, so they're going to be looking for something to have meaning, but they don't have any needs. It's all been taken care of, and they get in the habit and comfort of being everything taken care of. So that's the challenge that I think they face. They don't have a big drive. I'd like to share a story. I consulted with a young man who was in his 40s. Now, his father was one of the wealthiest men in UK, and a multi-billionaire. And his father enabled the son. The son didn't have any responsibilities whatsoever. And the son had a fantasy that he was going to be like his father, this wealthy billionaire. But he didn't have any of the drive. He just wanted to party. He was a playboy teenager. When I met with him and consulted with him in London, in my mind, I kept having in my mind, this guy's about 16 years old. And he was in his mid-40s. And I'm thinking, he's 16. This is the behavior of a 16-year-old. And all he wanted to do is party. All he wanted to do is, play and just have a good time. And he was angry with his father because his father wouldn't give him the business. And his father was getting up, closer to the 75, 80 mark. And he just assumed that he should take over the business. And I sat with him and I said, because he said, what do I do to get the business? And I said, I'm going to tell you something you're not going to want to hear. And he didn't want to hear it. I said, if I were you, I would give all your money back. His father gave him a large sum of money to get rid of him because he was annoying him. Said, just get out of here. He gave up on his son because his son was never going to be what he thought. And so he had inherited this large sum of money just to get rid of him. And I told him the wisest thing I could tell you to do, believe it or not, is to go and take all your money and give it back to your father, or put it into an investment and leave it there or let it grow. And go back and ask your father if I can work at the very bottom of the company and work my way up. And he said, I'm paying you money to tell me this kind of crap? And I said, you can call it crap if you want, but I'm telling you something I would advise you to do. The only way you'll ever get your father's company is to earn it, and you have not earned it. And he's going to find somebody to earn the company that he believes he can build the company and continue the company. You have no way of doing that right now. You spend your time as a playboy. I said, so my advice is to take all your money and put it in either an investment or give it back to your dad and let him pay you with that according to what you produce, and measure your productivity and actually find out what it's like to actually have meaning and productivity. Because right now you've had no dignity, no accountability, no responsibility, no productivity, nothing, and you're not going to do anything except blow money, and he knows that. So he just gave you a sum and get out of here. And you're angry at him because he's not giving you the company. You don't know how to run a company. So I told him, I said, to do that, if you do, you'll have your company. If your father sees that you can run every aspect of that company inside and out and you've earned it, all the people from the company will respect you, they'll do it, and you've earned the right to the company. So you may have 5 years of your work in your hand to go and do all that in the company, or longer, but you'd have a company at the end. If not, you're going to squander your money and you'll probably be poor someday in your life, thinking that you've been abused by your father. In some respects, your father didn't train you very well, and that's the lesson. But right now, you can't blame him. You have to look at yourself and ask, what do you want to do with your life? If you really want the company, go and earn it.
I hope you followed your advice.
Well, he was angry when he left me. I don't know what happened to him. I never got to see the guy again. He was angry because he was insulted that because he was used to being looked up to and sucked up to by everybody, because he was the one with always the money. And he bought friendship. Behind the back, I think people had a completely different view about him, but he was buying friendships and buying parties and everything else. And I think the best thing what I gave him, I think, was good advice. Go and put your money into investment, try to go and earn your money, stand on your own 2 feet, and if you want the company, go and earn the company, because you don't earn the company the way you're doing it.
That is a complicated family dynamic that we often see. The father had the perception that he was right. The son had the perception that he was right. So I'm thinking of a family that I'm busy working with. The man is 30 years old, has been through many rehabs for alcohol and drug abuse. Father has been typically entitling him and just paying for everything. So father came to see me and said, change my son, I want him to work now. And son said, no, I don't want to work, not interested, my father pays for everything. I look at these two and I think they have completely conflicting goals that they are working towards. If that was your son, and you are the father who had been before not knowing with wisdom to teach more empowering skills to your son, what would you say if that was Daniel?
Same thing I've said to him. I told him, I lived on the streets when I was a teenager. And my dad made me accountable at age 9. So I had my first little company at age 9, and he made me pay for room, clothing, and rent.
Wise father.
So I have no issue about being on the streets and know what it's like to do that. So I have no fear about that. So I told him, I said, well, I have no fear of putting you on the streets to make you grow up and learn from hard knocks. So if you expect me to just take care of something for nothing, then just know that's not going to happen. If I see you making progress towards your independence, I will support and help you. But if I see you just squandering your thing, I'm not going to pay for it. So you'll find out the hard way. And if you want to be angry and blame and act out and stuff like that, then that's just your own life. I'm not going to buy into it. You're not going to suck me up into with guilt trips and things like that, because that means nothing to me. You're going to have to stand on your own 2 feet. And my son's got that. He saw that. So he wants to earn money now. He wants to go and build his own life. So I'm inspired by that, because that means that there's a drive there. I was curious about that up until about just the last year or so. But I see that I made it really clear that 25 was his turning point. He's 25 in December, so he's got 3 or 4 months to go, and he realizes he's going to have to get his act together.
We as parents then really need to have the skill of having a thick skin, not going into any guilt or altruism, and knowing that what you are doing is really the best for the child.
Well, you're not here to be liked, you're here to be loved, and you'll be loved if you do it, because they'll respect you. When they stand on their own 2 feet, they'll always come out, I guarantee what they'll do. If they get on their own 2 feet, they're going to take you out to dinner. And they're going to say, no, it's on me, I want to pay for it. And that's a very rewarding moment for their life when they say, no, it's on me.
I had the first experience when my daughter took me out for dinner and she said, I paid for you.
Yes.
It really felt good.
Yeah, it was, but that's today, in the 1950s, I think that occurred by 16 to 18. And then by the 80s, that was probably 20, 21. And now by 2015, that's probably mid-20s.
But research is actually showing it is 28 to 30.
Yeah, it's in the 20s, mid-20s to 30. Sorry. I see that now. I think that's because we're living. I always say that, I remember reading many, many years ago, and I've said many years now, that the place of reproductivity is about 1/3 longevity. So if we live to 81, we'll probably reproduce at 27. If we live to 60, we probably reproduce at 20. In the turn of the 19th or 20th century, there was people living around 60. And so people were reproducing at 20 and they were getting married at 16 to 18. And in the 1950s, there was a thing called an old maid. If you were 21, you were called an old maid. Nobody wanted you. You had to be married by 16 to 20. And it was really quite interesting. But today, people aren't getting married nor having kids until almost 30, and the late 20s to 30s. So everything is extended on because we're living longer. So I have to factor in that longevity factor to put realistic expectations on it. I was already independent as a very young teenager, but I can see that my kids, because they've gotten some education and everything else, I can see that they've gone a little farther. So I say 25 to 30 is that transition for me. I have an expectation of them completely independent, somewhere in that range. And my son, I'm putting pressure on 25. He'll be totally independent probably in the next year to two, because I'm going to push him that way.
And it's going
You
to
have to push him off the cliff and let him fly.
Yes. That's what the eagles do. They push their chickens out of the chicks out of the nest.
Yeah, you have to do that. Like I say, my father was pretty wise. I don't know if that story would be helpful, maybe.
It will be helpful. Please share it.
You know, I went to my dad when I was 9 years old in the summertime, and I said that I wanted to earn some money. And so I asked him if there's anything I could do to earn some money. And he said, well, did you mow the yard? Yes. Did you edge the sidewalk? Yes. Did you sweep the sidewalk? Yes. Did you sweep the garage and clean out the garage? Yes. Did you get all the leaves out of the gutters? Yes. Did you clip the hedges? Yes. Did you pull the weeds around all the flower beds? Yes. Did you shine my shoes? Yes. Did you clean your room? Yes. He said, son, I don't know of anything else that needs to be done. Those are all the responsibilities that you could potentially earn money, and some of them I don't pay for anyway. So you're going to have to go to the neighbors. And I went, okay. I wasn't upset about it, just really, okay. So I started walking down the street, and I found the Evans house to be unruly. And I could see that there was work to be done on the yard and things. So I knocked up on the door, and I said to Mrs. Evans, I said, would you like your lawn mowed and edged and your hedges clipped and the weeds and things? And she said, well, yes, how much? And I didn't think in advance to do a lot of planning. So I went, $5 for the yard and this and that. And she said, well, that sounds like a fair amount. Absolutely. When can you do it? I said, I'll do it today. So I worked most of the day on that. And I made some money. And I went out and bought me a baseball and a glove and a bat. And I was into sports at the time. So I started buying this, and it felt really great to be able to earn it and go and buy the things by myself with my own money. It really felt great. And a few days later, my dad said, I see you got a new baseball and a new glove. Where did you get that? And I said, well, I did what you said. I went to the neighbors, and I started earning money, and I bought this. And he said, and what did you do? And he said, well, I mowed and I edged. And he said, what equipment did you use? And I said, well, the ones in the garage. He said, son, I have to tell you, there's something I have to teach you. There's a thing called depreciation and wear and tear on equipment. And since you used it, you have to pay me for the wear and tear, because if it gets destroyed, I have to buy another one, and it's not fair for me to buy it when you're using it. And I understood that. And he said, so you owe me $7.50 for the rental of those equipment, and plus the gas cost. I went, well, I don't have it. He said, well, that'll teach you not to spend your money until all your bills are paid. So I had to do 2 more yards just to pay that back, plus the interest on that new 2 yards, or the amount on that. So now I'm broken even after those 2 yards, and I'm zero. So I then started doing the new yards and started making money, but I paid him, and now I understood that new accountability was on place, which was a little discouraging because I didn't make as much money. I had to work harder. Well, one day I was mowing, and there was a boy on a bicycle came up to me, and he started talking to me. And I got this idea, I could get this guy to push this lawnmower. So I said, would you like to make some money? He said, sure. I said, I'll pay you 50 cents if you mow, 50 cents if you edge, and 25 for raking and sweeping. He says, you got it. Because that was like almost $2 to him. And I thought, this is great. He's gonna like this. So he took it on. He got 2 of his buddies. So I had 3 buddies doing the yards with the equipment.
3 employees.
3 employees. They were buddies, but they were employees. And then I got 3 more and 3 more, but I got the Zubrods and the Mallows equipment. They called my dad and found out how much they were charging, so it was the same price. And I had this little business going, and I had 3 yard systems going on throughout the day, and sometimes I get 2 or 3 groups with each of the equipment. And I ended up paying everybody off, all the gas, everything, and make $45 US dollars at the end of the day for myself. Now that was in 1963. That'd be worth about $700 today. So I was doing quite well, actually, when you stop thinking about it. Many people don't even make that today. And when I did that, I bought me a bicycle, a golf set. I started buying all kind of stuff. And my dad saw that every time I was making money, I was just spending it. Immediate gratifying spending. And so out of wisdom, he bought me a coin collection set and a little bank. This bank that was about that tall, about that wide, that you put the coins in. I started filling up the coins, because in those days people paid with coins and paper dollars. So coins were still useful. So I filled up this coin collection set. It became really inspiring to try to find those coins to fill up that whole set, because those coins were worth more. And I actually went to a coin collection meeting to see what values were. It incentivized me. So I now was not just spending it, I was putting it into savings. And my dad knew what he was doing, and he was trying to get me to save, think a little bit longer. And he gave me the piggy bank. One thing he didn't do is ever give me a way to open it. So in my office on the 52nd floor of Houston, Texas, in my office there, in my credenza, is the same piggy bank from 1963 that my dad gave me, filled with the same coins. It's probably worth a fortune today, because those coins would be, some of them would be 100 years old, more than 100 years old. So he gave me that, and I use it as a metaphor to think long term. Now, when I started doing that, I still made money on top of that. I still bought things, but I had the savings in place. Then my dad said to me, I'm proud of you for doing some savings, but I want to teach you the next level of accountability. And I want you to know what it's like to buy your freedom. And I was thinking, uh-oh, what's coming now? Because every time he talks to me, I'm ending up with net less for me to play with. And he said, I want you to know what it's like to have freedom. So from now on, you're going to pay for your clothing, your rent, and your food at the house. $7.50 a week. That's going to be your responsibility. And I paused for a moment, and I kind of took a deep breath, and I thought, what that's going to keep me from doing. And then I said, okay. And he said, but you're going to have the freedom now that you have your new bicycle. You can go anywhere you want, anywhere, as long as you're home by 9 o'clock at night. So early in the morning, at 5, 6 in the morning, I would get up on my bicycle and just drive as far as I could, 35 miles, in a new direction to explore the city and turn around and drive all the way back. And I'd take a sandwich with me and just drive all the way back and get home by 9 o'clock. And that allowed me the adventure to expand my space and time horizon, to think a bigger game. And my dad, I think, gave me freedom. He taught me how that is in freedom. And I think that's been with me ever since. And so although I didn't do exactly the same with my kids, and I think that I was probably too lenient in some cases, that idea is still stuck with me and how important that is. So I think that that's a great gift. Now, some people would have classified that as child abuse, child labor law defiance, and all this other stuff. In fact, one time I was saying that story in New York at a Learning Annex meeting, and a lady was offended. And she said, I would like to have your father's contact details. I would like to report him to Child Protective Services. And I looked at her, I thought, what a strange thing to do. And I said, well, I'll give you my dad's address. And I gave him his cemetery plot, because he had passed away. And she was so irate. She thought that was abuse. I thought it was a gift. I look back now and I wish I'd done more of that with my kids, because I could see now that would have sped up the process.
That was truly a gift, John.
Yeah.
It's very wise father.
Yeah, I think he had a wisdom, but he also knew that I had learning disabilities, and he wanted me to be street smart.
That makes me think of the 7 Habits of a Highly Effective Family, Stephen Covey, of 7 Habits of Highly Effective Person. Let's talk about highly effective habits for a family to develop, to really grow a very powerful first generation, second generation, third, and into many multiple generations. And if we look at the 7 areas, spiritual, mental, vocational, financial, family, social, and physical, let's start to talk first about vision and purpose. If that's the starting point. That is what gives meaning to life.
Well, I wrote on my goal book. As you know, I have a big goal book. And I wrote on the goal book many, many years ago when I first started having children. So this is a quarter of a century ago and longer. The one thing that I wanted for my kids, because I wasn't always there, because I traveled a lot, and I wasn't always able to be at the functions that they might wanted me to be at because of my travels and what I do for a career. But the one thing that I felt that, after reading Cahill Gibran, I remember reading in there, it said, they come through you, not to you.
The prophet.
The prophet. And I thought, well, that's true, because a lot of parents I see interfere with their kids and direct their lives, and then the kids are living like, it's kind of they're not even living their own lives. And I wanted my kids to be free. My parents gave me a lot of freedom that way. So I basically said, if you need my help, I'm there for you. If you don't, I'm not going to impose. But I believe that they were there for their own destiny. So I think that helping them, what my one objective was, is to help them find what their mission was, and then do what I can to get them moving on it and help them achieve it. not enable them, but to help them achieve it, to catalyze it, to give them as much education as possible to do that. So that's it. So that's why I'm inspired to see that all three now have their mission. That to me is a very important thing for a parent, I think. And so I think that was obtaining. Finding out what that void is. Now all three are different. One had a void with clothes and fashion, and it was evident at a young age. A very young age, it was obvious that she's going into that business. It was pretty obvious. Or somehow going to figure out how to buy clothes at least. And the other one was more intuitive and more educated oriented and more philosophical oriented, and she fit into what I'm doing. And my son was the game player. He liked to play games, and he wanted to make a living playing games, it's his business. So you could see from young ages these things emerging. I always kept the door open within my own company, because sometimes a parent would love to see your children take over companies, but at the same time I didn't want to impose it. I wanted it to be natural, but now I know what they want to do and I'm inspired by it, whatever it is. I don't care what it is, just what it is. Make sure it's what there is. Finding that, I think, is the crucial thing. I don't think that's going to surface in somebody if they're enabled. I think that has to come from having frustrations and accountabilities. The void. They need to have, well, if my dad's not going to take care of me, who is? And actually, I know my middle daughter actually started dating older guys to try to take care of her for a while, and then got burned from each one of those. And that was the perfect thing for her to do. Because every time she'd go out with them, they'd buy her things and do things, etc. when she was, late teens, early 20s. And kind of like older guys. And that was probably compensation for me not always being there, but also she realized that they controlled her by doing that. And she got really, as she called it, kind of burned by that one time. And she says, I don't want to do that. And then when she saw her mom in a financial situation, she says, I don't want to be that. So those voids were perfect. I'm very grateful that they went through those voids. So they have to have challenge. Our highest value, which is called the telos, is where our meaning and purpose is. If you're supported, you tend to inject the values of others. If you're challenged, you tend to go back to your telos. So it's the challenges in your life that give you your purpose in life. So you have to be willing to give your kids and allow them to go through the challenges and learn through trial and error of their own. They have to go through it. You can guide them, but you got to let them go through and bang their head against the wall a few times to get the voids they need to get going. There has to be, quote, a dysfunctional family that is called, it's really functional, but it has to be that in order to get them mad enough to go out and do something.
You become the most innovative when there's a pain or a challenge or a frustration or a resentment that you want to transfer.
That's when you say, what do I want to do? I can't rely on somebody. I saw that recently in a woman and a man. A man had a fling, a husband. And the woman just lived in sort of a pipe dream fantasy that he was going to take care of her. And the second he had a fling, and it was only a one-nighter, he was not interested in the long term, it was just a one-night fling. And but she snapped and she realized, if he's gone, I'm stuck. And she just immediately had a new void, and she says, I'm going to build me my own income source. And she got really clear. And the moment she did, instead of enabling the kids, she said, you stand on your own 2 feet. So one of the best things that ever happened in that family dynamic is his little fling. Because what it did is woke up the whole family, made the kids accountable, made the wife balance out the equation, not live in sort of la-la land. And now they're closer than ever. They're closer than ever, but they've catalyzed the change. So I've chatted with them, and they said, even though there was this illusion of betrayal and all this other stuff for a couple days, they now realize one of the best things that ever happened is that event. And it was a wake-up call. And I think that things go on in life to get us back to our highest value, our telos.
A good spiritual habit is to create voids.
To create a void, to allow them to have a void. As I said, my parents dropped me off on the freeway when I was 14 to hitchhike to California from Texas. And I joke, I said I want to drop my kids off, but they kept coming home.
John, let's talk about a good mental habit. I'm thinking of Charlie Munger, who has been Warren Buffett's best friend for multiple years. And Charlie, I've listened to him earlier this year, where he calls himself a polymath as well. And he says the biggest investment that you can make in yourself is to invest in your mind and to study human behavior. And that is what you've dedicated your life to. So what advice would you give to a high net worth family, or even a family that is busy building their wealth for the family? What is a good mental habit to learn to have?
Well, I think that because human value systems underlie behavior, knowing the values, the priorities of each member of the family, I think is a smart move. And knowing that the decisions that they make are going to be based on whatever their values are, their highest values. Because every decision a person makes is based on what they believe will give them the greatest advantage or disadvantage, greatest reward over risk at that moment, according to what's important to them. So if you expect them to live in your values, you're going to be aggressively betrayed. If you expect them to live in their own values, you'll be getting exactly what you expect, and you won't be angry. So I call anger and aggression, blame and betrayal, criticism and challenge, despair and depression, and a desire to exit and escape the symptoms of a projection of unrealistic expectations on family members. You're going to want to change them and get angry and want to avoid them, and that can undermine relationships and families. So members of the members of families, knowing what those values are and knowing how to communicate in those values what you want is, I think, important. So there's a great question to help. First, determine what the values are, and there's a value determination process that I have, as you know, on my website for that. And the next thing is to ask how specifically is what their top three values, what's most important to them, helping you fulfill what your top three values, what's most important to you. If you understand that what their values are serving yours, you'll respect them and communicate in their values more effectively. If you think that your values are right, like most of us do, and think other values are not, then you'll project onto them your values and expect them to do something, and you'll create conflict. So knowing what the values are and knowing how to respect those values and communicate the values, I think, is essential, not only in family, but in extended family, in business, in society, children, everything. So that is a crucial habit to have. And I think learning and studying human behavior allows you to know how to work in society more effectively with realistic expectations. Because so many people run around with totally unrealistic expectations. Parents expect their kids to be exactly like them. Kids expect their parents to be like a storybook. Everybody is throwing and projecting their values on everybody else, and everybody's running into these snags. And they're calling it a dysfunctional family, but it's not. It's just a lesson, and the symptoms are just feedback systems to teach them how to learn how to communicate. And so I think that Charlie Munger, because he's so well read, and he studied human behavior and philosophy, I think that helped him, and I know it certainly helps me, because as I teach the Breakthrough Experience program where I introduce some of these principles, I can see the impact it has on people's lives when the door is open in their mind of what and how human behavior really works, not the fantasies. As Dirac, the Nobel Prize winner, said, it's not that we know so much, we know so much that isn't so. And we fill our lives with a whole bunch of fantasies and delusions about how life's supposed to be instead of the way it is. And the magnificence of the way it is far greater than any fantasy will ever impose on it. So learning how human behavior works, I think, gives everybody an advantage.
Great. So as a summary, the mental good habits is know value systems and study human behavior. Study human behavior and learn the art of communicating. When you're trying to sell to somebody in business, if you don't know what their needs are and values are, you'll have a hard time selling. You won't be in business. Well, we're all selling ideas to our family, and we're selling ideas on maintaining wealth. If we don't know how to communicate their values, they're not going to buy it. John, a good vocational habit. It comes to mind that you so often say, love what you do and do what you love. Isn't that the best habit for your career, of your vocation too? If you're not getting up in the morning and having a desire to go to work, life's hell. And if you're not having a desire to make a difference in the world, then you're missing out on life. I think it's innate inside us. It's part of our own nature of human beings to make a contribution. So finding something that's inspiring and meaningful at work is crucial. There's two ways of doing it. You either go and do what you really love to do and delegate lower priority things, or link what you're doing to what's highest on your values so you can find meaning in it. I try to teach both of them to people because people are in different stages and sometimes they're in transition between working for others and working for themselves.
But if you don't find something that's meaningful, you'll have a Monday morning blue, a Wednesday hump day, a thank God it's Friday, and a weekend. But if you do something that's meaningful, every day is Sunday, or every day is a sacred day. And because you're getting inspired to do what you love doing every day. And I think you don't age as much. I think you have more vitality in life. I think that you have more meaning in life. I can't imagine going through life and not being of service to people. I think that's part of an essential component of fulfillment. So finding a career that's meaningful is essential, and not accepting anything less. Linking things temporarily as a transition is understandable, but stopping in mediocrity, I think, is unfulfilling. So finding out what you love to do. I was having dinner at a Thai restaurant in Sydney, Australia, Double Bay, Australia at one time. And Tom Jones, the singer, was there. And I was with my wife at the time, who passed away, as you know, 11 years ago. And we were having dinner, we joined him. And he was with his partner, this male partner, that travels with him when he does his gigs. And he was telling us that every day he gets up, he has a protein shake, he goes and works out, he gets in shape, he sings and practices his voice, and he does the next gig. And he does 250 singing engages at the time a year. And he says he can't wait to get up in the morning and do another singing. And he says in the evenings he relaxes, he has a glass of wine, and he goes to sleep, and he gets up and does his protein. He's like a routine. And even if he's in different countries. He says, but he's loved to sing, and he wanted to travel the world singing. He found what he loved to do, and he became a legend because of it. Whenever you're doing something that's highest on your value, and you're sticking to the ABCs of priority instead of the lower priorities, you tend to expand your space and time horizons. You tend to see a bigger vision. You tend to give yourself permission to go out and do something more extraordinary and more contribution. And you're willing to tackle challenges and serve people more. And you increase the probability of actually creating a legacy in life, leaving a mark in the world, which I think is a lasting fulfillment. So I can't think of anything else other than in business than to make sure that you're finding out what's highest on the values and make sure you're fulfilling that and sticking to priorities. The highest priority thing, if you can get to do the highest priority thing every day that you can, and know the art of delegating the lower priority things, you'll want to go to work every day.
Just want to add with this, John, speaking to the mothers, that is a vocation, the full-time mom at home. It reminds me of Rose Kennedy, who said, I'm raising world leaders. That's a job. That's a career. That's a vocation.
Well, I remember one time when I attempted to take on that role for like 2 days. And
I'm sure your children fired you.
Well, no, we had a pretty good time. There was a time I wanted to choke him a few times, but all I know is that when she came back and took over, I was very grateful because I realized I was not, my value system had been training me to do business, not manage kids. Her values were kids, so that is a business. But the woman who's dedicated her life purely to the family and not doing business in family, but dedicated to the family, she's in the business of producing a product, the children, that is going to be released long-term into the marketplace. She's also learning the art of making sure she does do things that fulfill the husband's values too, because he's probably paying for those activities she's doing if he's working and making money. And so she still has the responsibility of making sure she's meeting customers' needs. The husband's a customer, her kids are customers, and they're also products. So learning all that is still business and still producing. It's just in a different form, but it's still production. And sometimes women who don't understand that will devalue themselves relative to women that are out working and not honor that form. Now the downside, the vulnerability side of that, is that they don't have an income source. If something happens to their husband, he dies, or they don't have insurance, or she doesn't have a skill, then she's vulnerable. So it's riskier, but it can be just as rewarding. As long as she's selling in his values, as long as she's taking care of his health, as long as she's helping him get what he wants, then that whole system works. Because that's how it was done up until about 1960s. It was the husband did this, the wife did this. Today we're more androgynous. The higher the socioeconomics in the country, the more androgyny and the more male and female play both roles. And so today women are giving themselves permission to do whatever they really want to do. If they want to be home and raise beautiful children, then they have the right to do it. There's an art to it. If they want to work and do work and children, they have a right to that. If they want to do complete work and not have children, they have a right to do that. And I think that's great that they have given themselves that freedom now.
So, in summary, a good vocational habit is to love what you do what you love, and love what you do and do what you love. And as Warren Buffett said, tap dance to work in the mornings.
Tap dance to work. Yeah, I think that if people don't get that, I think they. I'm amazed. I've been in limousines and car services many times, and I asked the driver, so do you love what you're doing? And on occasion, you'll get somebody that says, yeah, I love it. It's our family business, da-da-da-da, and you get that. Probably 20 to 30%. And then a lot of times they'll look in the mirror and they won't say anything. And then they'll finally look at me and say, you got to be kidding. It's a job, man. I got to pay the bills. And when I hear that, I said, do you mind having a conversation? He says, no. I said, is that how you want to live your life? I start chatting with him. I actually had a guy start a company that he wanted to do as a result of chatting with him in the car, because he was sitting there not fulfilled. And I asked him, what is his real love and what is he doing? And we actually worked in about a 45-minute drive. We worked to try to figure out a game plan and a business plan to help him get to the next level.
Great.
And he did it.
Great for
He
him.
started his own company.
So let's look at the next one, financial good habits. We recently had a big family lunch celebrating one of the cousin's 18th birthday, and as James Hughes writes in his book Family Wealth, that the elders play a very important role in the teaching and educating the next generation. I asked the men of the family, the first generation men, to give him a word of advice. And Rolf, my husband, gave the following advice. He said, learn to pay yourself first and save, save, save. Isn't that possibly one of the top financial good habits to learn to have?
Well, in my particular situation, that was the turning point. I did a lot of making money to buy things, but I didn't actually make money to work for me. I was its slave until I made a decision around age 28. At age 28, I realized that I want to buy my freedom. I want to have money work for me. So I wanted to save it and invest it. And I paid myself first. I did it electronically. I saved, and I kept increasing the savings, and I did it methodically. And lo and behold, I was able to get to financial independence. It wasn't overnight. It took years, but it was very rewarding to know that we actually accomplished that. And all I can say is that that's probably the biggest significant thing. Now, you don't want to save only, you want to learn to invest, because saving will not keep up with inflation. But at the same time, as saving is the starting point, because the second you have savings and you build it up, you then want to learn about investing. So the next step automatically comes in. And as you learn about investing, you become more sophisticated. And as you accumulate wealth, it's like a baby, you want to take care of it and see what you can to help it grow. And so that is probably the smartest thing to do, is make sure you find something you love to do so you can't wait to do it. Make sure it really truly meets people's needs, because don't project assumptions. Make sure it earns an income. There has to be a demand for supply. Make sure that you save a portion of it, and then make sure and pay yourself first and save a portion of it, and then learn to invest. If you do that, and learn how not to rob other people of accountability and rescue other people. The big challenge that a lot of people do when they start to save money and invest money is people in their family or friends or whatever have emergencies, and then they bail them out. And they rob themselves of rob everybody of accountability. I've seen this over and again. People start all over. They've saved for 4 or 5 years, and all of a sudden a friend has an emergency or a family member has, and they expect it, well, you're the family, and they buy into the guilt trips, and then they squander it, and then they never get paid. Don't rescue desperation. Invest in inspiration.
So a good financial habit is learn to pay yourself first by saving, learning to invest, and secondly, to not rescue.
Yeah, and don't let your life go by where you've worked your whole life for money. Have your money working for you. Don't be a slave, be a master.
Then good habits in family relationships. I cannot think of anything of higher value than to understand each other's values and to understand how your value is supporting and linking with my value. That is,
Yeah,
do you agree that is a great habit to learn?
I think the story that I had many years ago, I had a man that came to the Breakthrough Experience program, and he goes, I wish my wife had been here. And I said, well, maybe the next time she can come. He said, I don't want to wait, a few weeks. I'd like her to know now. So I was in Columbus, Ohio at the time when I did the program. And I flew back to New York where I was living. And he flew his wife to New York to meet with me 2 days later. And I spent the day in a hotel room with his wife, which sounds kind of interesting.
And he paid for you.
And he paid. So I was paid to stay with his wife in a hotel room. That's a misnomer, but it's fun. I joke about it. But what I did is I found out what their problems were because they were having challenges in the relationship. Not major, but it was just they were picking on each other. And so I helped her identify what her values were. I helped her identify what his values were. And then I spent the morning linking those values. And she couldn't see what he was dedicated to serving her. And she couldn't see at all what she was doing was helping him in each other's values. So they were having problems communicating. So we spent 3 or 4 hours doing nothing but that. And afterwards, as we went to lunch, she says, I'm actually looking forward to seeing him to try all this out. It's an interesting feeling right now. I said, before we go back, we're going to role play and we're going to practice. It's like a sales training program. If you don't practice, you probably will have to learn by trial and error. So we practiced on if he's doing this, how does it serve you? If he does this, how does it serve you? And if you want this, how do you communicate it? And if you want that, how do you communicate it? Anyway, we spent the 4 last hours, we spent a whole day, on practicing communicating what she wanted in terms of what he wanted, and finding out whatever he wanted, how it served her so she would be reactive. Because that way you could love people for who they are and they turn into who you love. So she left, I left there, went back to my condo. And I got a letter, because there were still letters written in those days. I got a letter from the husband and said, I have no idea what you did with my wife in that hotel room. But all I know is, wow, what a different wife. And what I did is I spent the entire day training her how to get whatever she wanted from him and his values.
It's a great technique and a great skill.
And it changed their dynamic. And I saw her at a few seminars for quite a few years after that. And it made a difference in the family. They spilled it over into their children. They spilled it over into their friends. He spilled it over into his work. And it helps. It really helps.
Great family habit is know value systems and do linking.
Yeah, because the thing is about a family, the summation of all the values in the family counterbalance each other. And all the family values lead to androgyny. So if you have somebody that's very dedicated to saving money, you'll probably have somebody who wants to spend money. If somebody is dedicated to long-term vision, you probably want somebody that's immediate gratification. If you have somebody that's very intellectual, you probably have somebody that's really, a feeler, intuitive. There's always these pairs of opposites in the family. If you can't master the skill of finding out how the very opposite value of your own can serve you, you're going to want to project your values on them, and that's where all the tension comes. So learning how to manage paradoxes is part of leadership, and learning how to manage paradoxes in families is part of partnership. And so mastering that is a real important skill.
Thank you. And what about a great social habit? High net worth families will be wise to learn to have.
Well, if there's a lot of wealth, there's probably a lot of people looking at you. People find out about wealth and they want to know who you are. They're curious. It's like celebrities. And so you're now going to be an exemplifier of society. They're watching you. I mean, I was just in Hollywood a few days ago, and I get interviewed quite a bit because of human behavior. And I got interviewed a lot about the celebrities, about their lives. And I'm thinking to myself, leave people alone. It's their life. But people have this incredible curiosity about people that are either exceptionally wealthy, exceptionally successful in business, or exceptionally known socially. And there's this curiosity. It's like they live vicariously through other people. They're not building their own brands. They're living through other people's brands. So with wealth comes those accountabilities, and sometimes privacy issues, and sometimes people are just taking opportunistics. So you have to deal with that. So as far as a leader, leading and knowing how to manage all of that is essential. And the wisest way to do it is to fill your day with the highest priority things that you can do. and decide what is really the most meaningful, most priority, most important things, and stick to the most important every day. Because if you have your day completely filled with most important things, it doesn't get distracted by expectations of others as much. It doesn't get side ventured by opportunists. You're just busy, you're focused, you get things done. And you exemplify how to manage your life. Because I think everybody's known that if you're not busy with something, strange stuff fills it up. There's a law that whatever time you assume you're going to have tomorrow, it's usually less than that because unexpecteds come in, unless you set the agenda and turn away all else. You got to learn how to say no to outside influences and say yes to the things that are more important, to free yourself up. And by doing that as a leader, you're giving other people permission to do the same, which makes a more efficient society. Because we tend to get, I've noticed this, when somebody's got something extremely meaningful to do, let's say you have a young woman who's 27 and she's about to get married, and she's got a wedding date 2 weeks away. Her discipline, her self-governance, her prioritization is extreme when she's got a meaningful thing she's going to do. She won't overeat. She won't party too much. She's going to look her best. She's going to get in that dress. She's going to be focusing on that wedding. And she's just going to target it. And she's going to have self-governance because she's got a purpose to do. That same woman, if she doesn't have that wedding, if she has nothing going on the weekend and she just is just existing on the weekend, she'll be more likely to overeat or maybe drink too much or do silly things and not as productive. So it's important to fill your day with really meaningful things, because when you do, your executive center in the brain comes online and you act with self-governance and mastery. If you don't, your amygdala comes online and you go towards immediate gratification, impulsive behaviors, and addictive behaviors, and you end up not having governance. So it's so important that our own physiology and our own life in general gives us feedback to let us know how important it is to set priorities in life and have values and priorities.
So if I just summarize, a good social habit for high net worth family would be lead with inspiration.
Lead with inspiration and prioritization and delegation, and be authentic to yourself. That's called integrity.
That's such an important one. And then the last one, John, a good physical habit to have for long time, vitality and health. Because I believe my body is my vehicle that I take my service to the world. If I'm not in health and vitality, it's distracting me. So what is a good physical habit for anyone with the intention to create wealth for multiple generations to have physically?
Well, some of the same things we've been saying also enhance well-being and health. If you're doing something you love every day, you're going to live probably longer. If you have a purpose in life, you're going to live longer. A will to live. If you do, you're also going to have more governance, and you're probably going to eat to live, not live to eat. Gluttony is a foolish thing. Overeating is a foolish thing. Irrational behavior cost. Not having a routine, not having consistency, not having moderation cost. High volatility shortens lifespan. So I would say that if it's not food, don't eat it. And it's wise to eat quality food. Eat something that has nutritional value and fill your body with fuel. Supplement your life, because most foods don't have exactly what they used to have, and it's wise to supplement. Drink a lot of water, because it's better than stimulants. And breathe deeply. I call them the 7 doctors. Have a great attitude. Have some inspiring attitude by reading inspiring things every day. Get out and get 15 minutes of light a day, not much more, because you get too much, you age and wrinkle quick and dispigment yourself. But get a little bit of sun, because you need some vitamin D. Walk. I think people that live longer walk than any other activity. I think making sure that you have something that you want to do that's totally meaningful, that will last. Set a goal for 100 years at least. I was told by Paul Bragg, who lived into his 90s, to make sure you set goals to at least 100, 120 years. I do. I have those. I have longer ones. So I think that's essential. And then making sure you do a gratitude list every day. If you keep a document of what you're grateful for, your heart is more open and you've got more to be grateful for. And I think that allows you to sleep better and have less noise in the brain and less distractions. And so those are some things that I think help. And I also think that, if you find yourself gaining weight, you're obviously eating more than you need. And so use your physiology to guide you. I don't think I've fluctuated more than 4 pounds in the last 40 years. I'm pretty well the same weight. And I see some people, next time I see them, they've like lost 20 pounds and they're up 40 pounds and they're down, they're all over the place. And I think that if you're not doing what you really love and having the executive center come online, executive center, you end up having these volatilities. So my advice is to stick to priorities and eat to live, not live to eat. And make sure you drink a lot of water, breathe deep air, and get a little bit of light.
So I want to summarize that a good physical habit to adopt is to look after the health of your body and your mind.
Exactly. Paul Bragg was the guy that changed my life big time when I was a teenager. And he said there were 7 doctors out there. And the one was the doctor of inspiration. One was a doctor of perspiration. You got to work out a little bit. Then there was quality food. And then there was deep breathing. All the 7 things that I just mentioned. And also having work, do something that's work. Because if you don't have something to do work, you see people in their 70s and 80s that say, I've retired. If they don't have something meaningful, they're going around, can I help you? Can I help you? Can I do? They need something that has meaning to their life, something that has purpose in their life. If not, they decay. If you're not using your brain for high priority things that are meaningful, your brain deteriorates.
John, this was a wealth of information, and I am really wishing for this to serve many, many generations for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Great.
That the education that you bring to us and bring to the world, that it will continue to make a difference. And I really thank you for sharing the time with me.
Well, thank you. I love to do what I do, and thank you for the opportunity for us to do it. And I believe I think the older we get, the more we think about the other generations. And I think we're both on the mission now.
Yes.
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that, and let's go help some next generation.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.